In this video, we're going to show off a few things that are in bloom right this second, and also a few things that have been given to us for giveaways for the upcoming open garden that we're having this week. I think you'll see this video on like Monday, and then Friday and Saturday are the open garden. I think the tickets are sold out for Friday night and Saturday morning, and there are a few left for Saturday afternoon if you're interested. We have some plants out here that few things we've shown off in the past that are kind of peak flowering, but a couple things we really haven't talked all that much about. The scarlet bee balm is one of those things. We have other bee balm out at the front road that are improved varieties, but this is just the straight species of scarlet bee balm. It can be a little bit of a bully in the garden, so this is one that goes to sleep and comes back and really will take up a much bigger footprint when it comes back in the spring. So you got to figure out, as it's coming out of the ground, where exactly do you want it. I probably left this one just a hair wider than I would have wanted here, just kind of sculpting it in here. This is one of those perennials that you put in the border in such a way where you can sit someplace and watch the hummingbirds come to it, because the hummingbirds are just, these are literally flowers built for hummingbirds. There'll be some other things over here, but it's mainly the color is right, the shape of the flower is right, everything. This plant is literally constructed for it. A couple other things, it's in the Lamiaceae or the mint family, and because of that, it rarely gets dined on by deer or rabbits or anything like that. So one of those plants that's kind of helpful in that way. Does get some height on it. I'm 6 feet tall, and it's probably a little over half my height. So it's probably 3 to 3.5 feet, something like that. So you're typically going to put it slightly back in the border, just a little bit. We've got some other annuals and stuff around the front of it on purpose, because in time, typically this one will get a little powdery mildew on it. This morning is 78 degrees outside. Literally 78 degrees when I walked out at 6 o'clock this morning, and 90% humidity probably. And so it's just thick out here. And so what will happen, the foliage will come up clean, it'll start to bloom, and then the foliage will get some issues, and we'll cut the flowers off at some later in the summer. And the other things around it will kind of take over, so we don't have to look at that foliage. But I don't mind it. It's worth having because the hummingbirds just absolutely go crazy for this thing. So let's look at a couple other things in the garden looking good. So Steph has mentioned a few times that her dad was an avid gardener, and there's a few things in this garden that were from him, and that scarlet bee balm is actually one of those. This was brought from a house in North Raleigh where where she used to live, and where she went to when she was in high school and in college. And so this is one of those plants, that these, we love to have plants in the garden that have a story, right? We know where a lot of these things came from. The hydrangea paniculata tree form back here, which has a little bit of a lean to it, and I'm going to leave it leaning because right now people can get past it on the path. I'll straighten it out later. That was given to us by Dr. Durr. The Japanese maple, which is getting eaten a little bit by some potatoes and a few other things back there, was given to us by Matt and Tim and Mr. Maple, and so on and so forth. I mean, we can kind of go through this garden and probably tell you over half of the things that are in this garden probably have some sort of story on where they came from, or how we've been working on them in some way. The perennial border that we've put in behind the vegetable garden is looking great, except for it should have a row of dahlias behind it, and the rabbits have really done a job. I thought that they would grow through it at this point, and we do have a few that are blooming out here, but for some reason they just continue to eat on them. Typically, what we've seen with rabbits out here in the garden in the spring on the herbaceous perennials is, while the foliage is super tender, they'll eat on it in the early spring. Like Liatris is an example of that. They'll eat it when it's first coming up out of the ground, and then once it gets a little tougher, they stop eating it and move on to other grasses and other things that they're eating. But for some reason, those dahlias have just been right at the top of their list. But again, perennial borders really kicking in. This is timing thing we've had this year with making sure that things were going to be in bloom for people getting here, and hoping the bees really show up. And I see things flying around things right now, but we definitely have a few less than we had last year, although this part of the summer's really kicking in right now. And so there are a few more things buzzing about, and I hope by this weekend it'll really be a buzz with all the pollinators. The butterfly bushes, like everything else, needed it to really start to warm up. We were, nights in the 50s and even nights in the 40s in late May were super, super interesting. We have a lot of tomatoes coming now. Our tomatoes are always a little behind some other people. I'll see other people's, they're a little more ahead of ours. We definitely don't do as much fertilizing on them, but we'll still be picking tomatoes in near November. So, you know, by not pushing them, it seems to work out. Plus, I always feel like they like to do their climbing. If they can do as much of that climbing and put that energy into the climbing as they can, once they reach a spot where they can no longer climb, you know, because they climb to here, it seems like they put all that energy into it. If you have something really tall for them to climb on, so they're not going to produce a lot of tomatoes during that, but as soon as they've hit this spot where they can't go anymore, now they're full flowered, top to bottom, and I see a absolute ton of tomatoes down in here. So maybe by later in the week there'll be a few ripe ones, but I literally can now that I'm staring at it, every single plant is full of tomatoes all the way across there. The butterfly bushes, again, have kicked in because, you know, now it's 90 degrees outside and that's their sweet spot. This butterfly candy, Lil Raspberry is what this one's called. Such a unique plant. You can see it's vigorous in comparison to the other varieties in this series. I'm not, you know, the others are definitely dwarfs. I mean, real true dwarfs. But raspberry is definitely a mid-size one. You know, call this one 3 to 4 feet. This is about the size it got to last year, so totally expected that. The others seem to stay under 2 feet or so, but they're all completely budded up. But it took a minute, just because, again, it was quite a bit cooler than it has been. Definitely much cooler than it was last May. I asked Plant Development Services. Plant Development Services is the company who has the Southern Living Plant Collection, Sunset Plant Collection, which we did some filming for out in the West Coast with a Verde last November. I've been putting up those videos occasionally since we were out there. Butterfly Candy, the Better Boxwood brand, and Encore Azaleas. Okay, so I asked them to send us a few plants for the giveaway, and wow. So when you get here for the open garden, you'll put your name in a hat, and we've got pro pluggers to give away. I think there's a pro plugger for each of the 3 spots. There's Soil3 Compost, and you obviously, you know, when we pull your name, you can pick something that you can get back to wherever you're coming from. If you're flying, obviously, you know, you can give it to someone else if you want to, or whatever you want to do. But you can pick whatever. We've got each of the 4 Better Boxwoods, some Sunshine Ligustrum, Burning Love Leucothoi. This is probably our favorite plant in the Southern Living Plant Collection, quite possibly. Today, I'll say it is. Gardenias, we've got a few Jubilation gardenias. We've got Diamond Spire gardenias, Purple Daydream Loropetalum, this Charlie Boy cordyline, which is in that pot at the beginning of this video. You probably saw a little bit of this, maybe. Would they have seen it when we were filming the bee balm? Was this in the video? Probably. Okay, maybe you saw this at the beginning of the video. Just awesome cordyline. And a couple of lemon lime nandinas as well. I want to show you real quick. We're fighting the deer back here, and I put up a video as you're watching this Saturday about the deer back here. But you can see, we're talking about those tomatoes, and on one side you can see they're 2 feet above the cow fence, and same thing on the left over there. But in the middle, they're just reaching the top, and that's because deer had a feast over there. Same thing on our cucumbers down below, but hopefully got that under control now. I showed the Hydrangea paniculata tree form that Dr. Durr had given me that plant, and we've turned it into a tree. This is White Wedding Hydrangea paniculata. Look how compact that thing is. That thing's been in the ground for 4 years, and I didn't prune this one really hard like I pruned Moon Dance over there. I'm not really trying to size control this one this much because it's okay if it gets a little bigger, but it's really just incredibly compact. Of course, these flowers start kind of green like this and then get whiter and whiter and whiter as the season goes on. Blueberries are really coming in now, and we are getting them before the birds get them out here. What else is interesting along here? I think one of the more interesting things in the garden right this minute is, and I don't think we really did this on purpose, but sometimes you get these kind of fun coincidences. We had this autumn minaret daylily that is, I'm 6 feet tall, so this is a daylily that's already taller than me, okay? And it hasn't even opened the flowers yet. This one blooms later than others. I talked about it the other day with some folks. There's a reason this one isn't like commercially available. How would you put this in a truck and send it to a garden center without breaking these scapes? So I think that this one will always kind of be one of those kind of pass along plants, but if you can find it online and just get a little plant, don't expect to have them ship it 7 feet tall like this, and get this one. It is awesome. This is a great back of the border plant. I've never liked the foliage on daylilies. After they finish flowering, I'm always like, the foliage doesn't look great, but I'm able to hide the foliage behind the fence, right? And have the flowers come up above everything else. Blooms later than almost any daylily and then blooms almost the rest of the summer. It's not finished growing yet. And it's in competition with Rudbeckia maxima, which is also one of the, our giant native Rudbeckia that gets 7 or 8 feet tall. This was a fairly small plant, and it's above my head already. So we've got this race going on. This one is starting to open flowers, and this one hasn't. So I'm guessing the daylily is going to pass it just a bit. But heck, even yesterday, I think this was a little taller than that daylily, and now they're about equal. So really wild to have these kind of, almost comically tall perennials in the garden. And they're great because you can put them behind other things. You can put them behind a fence. You can put them in the back of the border. You don't have to look at the bottom of them. And these almost comical flowers come up above everything else. Here's one of the other bee balms. This is BU Bee Free. We've shown this one off a few times. This one tends to have the foliage a little cleaner during the summer. It was obviously, that was part of the selection process for it. And so it can be out front here, and the foliage still look pretty good on it, after it's finished flowering the rest of during the season. I think, we picked this particular Saturday in June for a reason. And, the reason for that is it overlaps a few late spring, early summer flowering things with the things that bloom in the absolute heat of the summer. Right, so we can get a little bit of overlapping. The blueberries are still on the blueberries. Some of the perennials that bloom a little earlier in the garden will still be blooming. The pineapple lily right here, I can see the flower spikes coming up on it now, and they'll be up about this big when folks are here. The agapanthus is starting to open. We have a lot of agapanthus in this garden that we've overwintered successfully by making sure it doesn't stay too wet during the winter time. Liatris that'll be blooming, that's typically a little bit later. Again, you just saw the late blooming daylily and the Rudbeckia, the giant Rudbeckia over there, and several other things. And then also combine that with kind of giving the annuals that we started from seed enough time, given a very cool spring, to have luckily a very cool spring. I'm not used to this 80 degrees walking out of the house in the morning yet, our normal summer. But finally, giving these enough to get going without fertilizing them and fertilizing them and fertilizing them. Our containers in the back actually look good as well. And again, we don't push things a whole lot, so there's a delicate balance there where we're trying to make sure the garden is kind of peak and things are overlapping at that time. I think that the evergreen dogwood will pretty much be done. I see flowers have started dropping off, and I don't think 5 or 6 days from now in 93-degree heat that's necessarily going to have any flowers left on it. But the viburnums have some droops on them from where they flowered earlier in the season, and just in general, the rest of it looks just super fresh and ready. The other overlap we have is the earlier flowering hydrangeas. The hydrangea macrophylla tend to bloom a little bit earlier. They'll be blooming. Oak leaf hydrangeas tend to bloom a little earlier, and then the later summer ones like paniculatas are starting to bloom too. So it's that sweet spot right there in June where things are overlapping. Hosta, this is Royal Standard, which Steph covered in the another one of her that is here because of emotional ties to it, really. But you see it come into full flower. This is one of those things where this is basically we would have called on the shelf green hosta, back in the back in the 80s. You had, like she said, like 2 variegations in green. There were others already at that point, I'm sure, but just what at retail, you had a green one, and then you had an outside variegated one and an inside variegated one, and that was it. But this, I mean, there's nothing wrong with this, right? I get that it's just a green hosta, but look, it also does this, which is, you know, super showy, and the bees, you know, absolutely appreciate it. If I don't point out when this is in the video that this is Roman candle podocarpus, then people ask, and there's another one in the back garden. We don't have a lot of plants where we have duplicates, and that's definitely one of the plants that we've duplicated out here. It's just such a great conifer. Again, all of our containers are looking pretty good. Those polka dot plants in the container there, Steph also planted a couple on the ground to make it look like they were just kind of accidentally in the pot and on the ground at the same time, or spilling out of the container in some way. Little details like that, you know, maybe folks notice or they don't notice when you're designing something like this. But they're lots of containers out here. The kufia is coming up through the, she's got this where the kufia will, over the course of the season, come up through this cordyline, which is kind of cool. The color combination looks great. A couple newer planted containers that where we put a Japanese maple in one, but our only crepe myrtle is in a container here, and you know, all the shades of kind of gray and blue and purple that are in this container are really, really striking. Again, we don't fertilize the containers a whole lot. For me, there's always a balancing act between, you know, pushing things and having them, you know, I could have probably had all these things this wide already. But then how much more would I be watering it, and would it last all the way until November, which is kind of my goal. So there's, you know, that's what I'm thinking about, you know, when I'm thinking about how hard do I want to push something, because the harder I push it, the more work I'm going to have to do on it, the more pruning or watering or whatever I'm going to have to do on it. But I think the containers look pretty good out here. Patio looks good. It's held up well over the last year, and other than, you know, a couple minor problems that we're dealing with deer, and, you know, deer here will move on. You know, they'll move on. They always do. They always move on. They may stop temporarily, but they always move on. And we'll go 6 months, 9 months without one. And then one shows up, and then we have to, what are we going to do? And then it moves on again. So not anywhere near what other people go through in terms of deer damage. But I think you can see, let me, back here, what I was talking about, agapanthus. Look at all of these agapanthus. They're all going to be open by this week. Agastache, another summer one, covered in bees right now. So again, we're in that sweet overlapping spot where some of the early stuff has still got enough color that you'll recognize it, and the summer stuff, the stuff that really likes the 90-degree days, starting to kick in, and they're overlapping really nicely right this second. So there you go. There's a couple of the things that we may have not shown off yet this season. Maybe a couple things we have along the way, but there you go. Look forward to seeing folks that are coming later in the week, and look forward to seeing others in future years. I suspect we'll continue to do this in future years as well. Thanks for watching.